representation, or rather, the lack thereof, the absence of black bodies in the video game world. In 2001, Three Rivers Press published The Ultimate History of Video Games, the story behind the craze that touched our lives and changed the world, by Stephen L. Kent. Kent is an American writer of video game journalism who authored pieces in electronic games, Next Generation, and computer entertainment news, as well as others. The back cover reads, "With all the whiz, bang, pop, and shimmer of a glowing arcade, The Ultimate History of Video Games reveals everything you ever wanted to know and more about the unforgettable games that changed the world, the visionaries who made them, and the fanatics who played them." Stephen Kent deserves some props for contributing to and compiling a massive amount of video game facts, backgrounds, and oral interviews from some of the major players in the video game world. There's just one little problem. Okay, a lot of little problems, and well, they're not little problems either. It's actually a very big problem. The lack of black bodies in this purported ultimate history. In this book, black bodies are missing on every level, from game designers to gamers. They have been omitted. With the exception of a few game titles featuring black athletes, which is troublesome in a way I will discuss later, this ultimate history is far from exhaustive. In the 21 years since its publication, progress has been made on all levels of gaming regarding black representation in the video game world. Sadly, it's not a lot of progress, and without black entrepreneurs, writers, developers, etc., I believe those in the video game world would still be firmly placed on the wrong side of history, perpetuating a white world of gamers, characters, and designers. Take, for instance, one of the earliest video game systems developed, the Channel F, in the 1970s. Channel F was designed by black engineer Gerald Lawson. Incidentally, he was also the leader of the team that invented game cartridges, a staple in home gaming systems for years. He also founded his own company, Videosoft, which made games for the Atari 2600. Muriel Tramus, considered the first black female video game designer, grew up in the Caribbean and in 1986 began work with the French developer Cocteau Vision. Her Atari game, Awilio, was a result of her focus on a literary perspective in the vein of historical novels, and a desire to center that work around her homeland on the island of Martinique. In her article, Gaming in Color, Uncovering Video Games' Black Pioneers, Tola Onanuga writes about Tramus's current project, which features black heroes and shows how skin color prejudice is the origin of present-day discrimination. If your first thought is that you have never heard of either of these early major figures in the video game world, you're not alone. At least now there are people writing about the absences and omissions, shining a light on important black individuals in history. Early representations of black characters in video games. What did it look like? Sports. It would be possible to choose one game from the many sports game focused on black athletes, but I would prefer to look at them as a whole. For marketing purposes, the video game industry picked a familiar athlete or two and branded a video game around them, and continues to do so into the present day. For this portion of the podcast, I focus heavily on the writing of Rico Norwood and Coding Blackness, a history of black video game characters. Beginning with Sega's heavyweight champ in 1976, we see what could be the first black video game character, but was rather ambiguous due to the limitations of grayscale art. Character's race became undeniable in the 1987 reiteration of the franchise. Various boxing games gained prominence in the video game world, as well as basketball, track and field, football, and golf, and have continued into the present day. While scrolling through the Moby list of black characters in video games, this was very apparent. Most black characters listed are either a prominent athlete or already established character from a movie or comic book. Especially during the period of the late 90s through the early 2000s, this can be seen. What this period tells us is that having a black protagonist in video games was contingent upon pre-established marketable source material such as hip-hop and sports superstars or big-budget films. This kind of representation becomes especially concerning when examined from a perspective such as William C. Rhoden offers in his book $40 Million Slaves, The Rise, Fall, and Redemption of the Black Athlete. Rhoden writes, Curt Flood was the first person I ever heard use a plantation metaphor in connection with professional athletes. I'm sure someone else had used the metaphor before him, but the first time the comparison really resonated in my soul was when Flood invoked the comparison in 1969. Rhoden goes on to share about a letter Flood wrote to baseball commissioner Bowie Kuhn, in which he said, "After 12 years in the major leagues, I do not feel that I am a piece of property to be bought and sold irrespective of my wishes." The reserve clause in Major League Baseball allowed teams to hold on to their players, giving them little freedom and subject to the whims of the team owner. Flood described this as the same system used in the South, where the plantation owner owned all the houses that you live in, and you worked for him, and you shopped in his store, and never got over the hump. It is not a difficult leap to trace the very roots Flood referred to, see them applied to professional sports and video games, perpetuating the cycle further, using black bodies to brand their products. Needless to say, sports games are a problematic representation of Black bodies. Next, we turn to some of the progress being made toward better representation of Black bodies in video games. Sims 4 features the work of Amara Virgil, also known online as X Mira Mira, who created a modded melanin pack containing tan, medium, and dark skin tones. LaTanya Pennington wrote in 10 Black Women in Gaming You Need to Know. In August 2020, Virgil also campaigned with other Black Simmers in order to get Electronic Arts, the developer of the Sims games, to incorporate better skin tones, and the fruit of that effort was released in December 2020 to The Sims 4. Along that same line, Oakland-based artist and UC Santa Cruz assistant professor A.M. Dark is focused on methods of representation that aren't dependent upon the modding X Mira Mira is known for, and is focused on creating better hair choices for Black character creation. Dark's solution, according to Trone Dowd, is to have Black artists create their own people's looks. Dark has used grants she has earned to bring in 3D artists to build the Afro hair library, which should be available in 2023. Finally, we turn to the character of Dandara from Dandara Trials of Fear. This research is taken from a gaming trend review by editor David Flint. Dandara was an Afro-Brazilian warrior who fought against slavery in the late 17th century. She was a hero who committed suicide after being arrested. This game is inspired by her life. Flynn describes an intricately designed world where she jumps from wall to wall to floors and ceilings fighting enemies. Her job is to free the salt from tyranny. His review also adds that the game has an amazing soundtrack. For me, a student of history infatuated with video games, female narratives, and unearthing the silences forced onto Black histories, Dandara is a character I will soon be getting acquainted with. This fierce, powerful Black woman, who is now immortalized in video game history with her own game, gives me hope for a more complete accounting of Black bodies in the video game world. These women, who are creating specialized content to better represent Black bodies in the video game world, give me hope. Lastly, Black authors highlighting the voices of Black gamers also give me hope. I would like to see more Black leads. I think a lot of game studios don't think about making a Black protagonist. But Black people do play video games. A lot of us do. So they should show us them. 13-year-old Edward Leonard, who has been playing video games since he was 4 years old. The absence of Black characters in games is a very serious problem. Black kids aren't seeing themselves as the heroes. They aren't seeing themselves solving the problems and wearing the capes. We deserve to feel that these gaming worlds were made for us to be in too, and that we belong there. Dr. Katrina Starks, media psychologist and game design teacher. We're not necessarily critical of the media we're consuming because it's so normal. Like, I've been identifying with white, brown-haired, middle-aged dudes for forever because those are the protagonists of these stories. And it's not just in games, so you just kind of go along and get used to it. I think all Black people tacitly understand this. A.M. Dark, Oakland-based artist and UC Santa Cruz assistant professor. I hear a lot of people say, why does it matter? Because it means a lot, you know? You want to see yourself. I've seen so many kid faces just light up when they see dolls and characters that look like them. It means something. Joanne Wilson, 3D artist and lifelong gamer, working on the open source Afro Hair Library. To see the Afro-Latino character's face unmasked on billboards, buses, and larger-than-life posters was an experience in itself and was one of the first times I was reminded that I exist in these digital spaces too. Rico Norwood. The fact that I could barely remember any video games with Black main characters, but almost every single video game that I play, I could think of a white character instantly, it's kind of sad. Seeing your favorite character with your skin color, I think it could definitely inspire kids, showing them they make it in the gaming world. 15-year-old gamer, Davis Favors. And with that, we conclude the podcast, Representation, or rather, the lack thereof, the absence of Black bodies in the video game world, by Jody Salazar.